The Ford Mustang, an iconic model right across the globe, has been around since 1965 and is now in its 7th generation. But Ford in 2019 did something a little bit different. They decided to make this, the Ford Mustang Mach-E full electric SUV. And today we're going to check it out. We've waited quite some time for the Mach-E to arrive in Australia, and it's really exciting for the Ford brand, and it's going to spearhead a lot of future electric products. But today I'm going to answer a couple of key questions to do with the Mach-E. First of all, is it a real Mustang? And second, is it a good family practical car? Well, we're going to find out. But before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe to Chasing Cars.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
So let's start off talking about spec. The car that we've got right here beside me is the entry-level Select variant, which has a 72.6 kilowatt hour battery and should have about 470 kilometers of WLTP range, so Ford says. However, this car also comes with quite a steep price tag. It's priced at $72,990 before on-road costs. Now, Ford has recently lopped a significant chunk of money off this car, down $7,000 from where it was before. So that's a bit of a better deal. However, it's still around $8,000 more expensive than a base Tesla Model Y. If you want to go up in the range of the Mach-E, well, you've got the choice of a premium and a GT variant. The premium variant is $14,000 more expensive than this car, and the top spec GT, well, that's over $100,000 before on-road costs. Now you might be wondering, how fast is the Mach-E Select? Well, it's got a claimed 0 to 100 time of 6.6 seconds, which isn't that fast when you look at what a regular GT V8 Mustang can do, but the GT version of this can do a 3.7 second 0 to 100 time, so that's pretty impressive. It's also worth noting that this, even though it's a mid-sized SUV, weighs in at an incredible 2,100 kilograms curb weight, so it's a bit of a porker. Now, although design is subjective, I thought I'd quickly run you through a few of the exterior features of the Mach-E, starting with the 19-inch aero wheels, which kind of look kind of funky, kind of cool. I don't know what they exactly do, but they are a good style point. One of the most interesting things about the Mach-E is the fact that it has these little tiny winglets on the side of the doors with a little button. You simply press the button, it pops an actuator out and opens the door just like so. Don't know how that would work if there was an electrical problem with the car, but it's a cool gimmick. So what's it like inside the Mach-E Select? Well, for the most part, it feels very premium, and it should for $72,990. But to start things off, the seats are quite comfortable. They're lacking some side bolstering, but they're made of artificial leather, not real leather. Not a huge deal, but I found them to be quite hot in summer. Altogether, the interior is nicely put together. The B&O sound system sort of has this cool soundbar effect that runs right across the dashboard, which I really like. Plus, that thing sounds awesome. I love playing my Spotify, and I just found that it was the perfect level of treble and bass. Awesome. So the main focal point of the cabin is this massive 15.5-inch touchscreen. It basically runs the entire car, from your climate control right through to your navigation, your Android Auto and your Apple CarPlay, and more. It does everything. But in doing so, it is also kind of busy, and you can kind of get lost in the systems. One cool thing is it has this little rotary dial here, which basically just works by changing from volume. You can change the fan speed and a few other functions. So it's a multi-function tool. Now this car is fitted with wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, which is a big win. It works flawlessly, no problems, great connection, and I've been running that for the last week or so. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of climate controls just stuck into screens. I find it a little bit hard to find, especially if you're running Android Auto or Apple CarPlay at the same time. This system is okay. You've got some of the functions here down the bottom, which work quite well, and the aircon in this car is extremely cold, so that's great for these really hot summer days. So the second biggest screen in the cabin for the Mach-E is the 10.2-inch driver cluster. That is quite simple and basic, and it doesn't show you a lot of information such as electrical efficiencies and such. It does show you range, your state of charge. It also shows your AEB and your speed with a little cute little ground speed thing, which I think is quite a nice touch. And of course you've got your trip computer and which gear you are in, or whether you're in reverse, drive or neutral. For the most part, I just think this could have been done a little bit better. Now, one thing the Mach-E has plenty of is storage space. There's storage basically everywhere. You've got a glasses holder up here, pretty functional. You've got your armrest, which flips up to a really deep bin, which is really handy. You've also got two cup holders. You've got a big charging pad for your mobile phone. deep door bins on either side, and you've also got USB-C and USB-A ports. So in terms of practicality, this car's pretty good. So sitting in the back now of the Mach-E, I'm really comfortable in here. I don't remember being this comfortable when I went on the launch of the car last year, but I've got plenty of knee room, plenty of headroom, plenty of toe room, and that's with the seat in my usual setting, and I've got long legs. So it's actually really comfortable. It feels right. And I guess it also feels spacious too, and that's because of this massive sunroof. You can't open it, but it gives you that sense that you're looking out into the world, and that's really cool. Now, also back here, you get two USB ports, a USB-C and a USB-A port, and you also have air vents, but there's no climate control back here. So, you know, it's fine for what it is. And there's also a fold-down armrest with two cup holders. So you've still got the practicality. I think this would be excellent for a group of four, a family going on a road trip. This would be perfect. So, round the back of the Mach-E, you're probably wanting to check out the boot. Well, inside, you get a 402 litre boot, which is pretty good space for this segment. You do get a nice little sun blind for your groceries, and underneath you get a little area to put your charging cable, which is really good. It's not in its individual bag, so that's really nice. Only problem is there's no spare tyre. So around the front of the Mach-E, usually you'd be finding a big 5 litre V8 under here, but that's not the case with this car. Instead, you get a 134 litre frunk, which means it's a little bit extra storage space. I've seen people make these into eskies, put ice in there, put drinks in there and go out to the beach, or even put some wet clothes, because it does have little drainage holes, which are really awesome for getting that water out.
Let's talk a little bit about running costs. For the Mach-E, service intervals are every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres. Servicing the Ford over 5 years will cost $780. The Mach-E is covered by Ford's 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty and also includes an 8-year, 160,000 kilometre battery warranty. In terms of electric efficiency, we extensively tested the Ford Mustang Mach-E Select over a week-long period and conducted a chasing car's highway range test and a recharge test to find out its real-world electric consumption. During the test, we used 16.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres for a real-world range of 429 kilometres. That result is 41 kilometres less than the WLTP manufacturer's 470 kilometre claim for the Mach-E Select. In terms of charging, from 50 kilometres to 350 kilometres of range, it took the Mach-E a pretty reasonable 30 minutes and 30 seconds and required 50 kilowatt hours of electric juice. The peak charging speed we saw for the Mach-E was 115 kilowatt, although the Mach-E has a claimed peak DC charging speed of 150 kilowatts.
So what's the Mach-E Select actually like to drive? Well, I've spent a lot of time in it this week getting to know it and finding out everything to do with it, whether it's city driving, sporty driving, or just commuting to work. But let's first talk about powertrain. So this car, the Select, has a rear-mounted electric motor that produces 198 kilowatts of power and 430 newton meters of torque. Now, you can get more powerful versions in the Premium and in the GT, but I think that this rear drive electric powertrain, just in the base grade, is a pretty good package. It's very punchy, and it certainly gets you up to speed very quickly, which is good, especially when you're merging onto the highway or you need to just get up to speed quickly to meet with traffic. Now, most of all, you're probably going to want to know about city driving with the Mach-E. Now, I think it's quite good in terms of its powertrain. It's quiet, it's very refined, but I do find that the suspension is a little on the firm side. But it's not a bad kind of firm, it's just a sportiness sort of flavour that they've injected into this car, and I guess that's where the Mustang sort of character comes into this car. It's much more sporty than I was expecting. When I was on the launch with it originally last year, I found it to be the same even in the Premium and the GT. Obviously the GT is a really far-fetched, extremely powerful vehicle with 358 kilowatts of power, but do you need to spend all that money and have a similar driving experience? Well, I think the Select does an excellent job around town for the most part. It's just that little bit firm. Maybe it could be changed for an update, but really, for $72,990, I was sort of expecting it to have the Magna-Ride dampers that the GT variant has. Now, when you do get out into the open road and you are the sort of person who wants to have a spirited drive, well, this car really rewards you for that. You may not get the same experience in a Tesla Model Y or even a Polestar 2. This is a pretty capable vehicle when you get up to speed, put it through some winding corners, and it just has that confidence to just keep pushing on. And with all that electric thrust, even in base guys, you'll get to 100 in about 6.6 seconds, which is plenty fast enough and sort of about where hot hatches were about 5-10 years ago. Think of it almost like a hot hatch, but rear wheel drive, almost like a Focus ST. Now, in terms of safety, Ford has really gone above and beyond with the safety package for this car. There's plenty of passive and active safety on this car, and it does have a 5-star ANCAP rating as well, which is great peace of mind, especially if you're driving your family around day in and day out. Now, the safety systems are generally pretty good, although I did find the lane keep assist to be, I keep harping on about this over and over, but just not good enough in terms of the way that it's tuned for Australian roads, and it just seems to duck and dart around the place and twitch at the steering, and I just can't stand that. Now, one thing I did find a little bit strange was the lack of regenerative braking modes in the Mach-E, and I found that you couldn't sort of adjust it with the paddles on the steering wheel like some other EVs on the market. Instead, it's all done through the driving modes. Now, there's 3 driving modes to choose from with the Select. There is the Whisper mode, there's the Active mode, which is in the middle, and then there's Untamed, which is the sportiest mode of all. But I found that the regenerative braking changes depending on which mode you're in, and if you don't really want a combination of really sporty and lots of regeneration like Untamed, it just is a bit, not very individual. And I think that it would be better if you could adapt the regenerative braking on the steering wheel paddles, or even just do it through the settings menu. So what are my final thoughts on the Mach-E Select? Well, it may be a base model car, but it doesn't feel like it, and it doesn't have a price tag that suggests so. For $72,990, it drives like a sophisticated piece of metal. It is not a basic car. It's got sophistication, it's got that electric thrust, it's got the fun factor and the enjoyment levels that'll make you want to just jump in and drive whenever you want to. You'll really enjoy just driving this every day. The only real downsides I found were the slightly firm ride and also the strange regenerative braking setup. But other than that, I've had a lot of fun in this car, and I'm really excited to see where Ford goes in the near future with their other electric products. If they're as polished as this one, I'm sure they're going to be in for a lot of success. So what are my final thoughts on the Mach-E Select right behind me? Well, the first thing I want to do is address the questions that I talked about at the very start of the video. The first one being, is this a Mustang? Well, unfortunately, no, it's not. It's quite different to a Mustang in a lot of different ways. It's a lot heavier, it's got 4 doors, and it's fully electric. And it doesn't drive anywhere near the same. But that's not a bad thing. It's got a personality of its own, which I really, really love. The Mach-E is a little bit firm, especially around the city, but once you take it up into the hills, into the mountains, or just on a nice B road, you'll find that this car really shines. But what about the family practicalities of the Mustang Mach-E? Well, the technology is great, the practicality is good, the back seat's really roomy, and the boot's a decent size too. So that's all big plus points. But I just can't get over that price. At $72,990, it's an expensive car, and if you want the GT with 358 kilowatts, well, you'll be asking over $100,000 before on-road costs. So yeah, sure, there are better options out there in terms of overall price, but I think this car really drives well, and that really makes up for it and is part of the reason why it's a little bit more expensive. Yes, the Polestar 2 exists, yes, the Tesla Model Y exists, but I think this sits in its own little niche, which I really love. So all in all, I just wish Ford's development department decided to just call it the Mach-E and just forget the Mustang name altogether. I think it can live on its own, in its own world, and I think it's better for it. But what do you guys think about the new Mach-E? Is it something you'd be after? Well, leave your thoughts down below in the comment section, and while you're there, make sure you like and subscribe to Chasing Cars.